Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes, from their first to their worst. So we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, someone who got into adulthood and immediately tried to book a return flight. Me. Yes, I'm back for the fourth and final installment of the Crushes That Raised Us miniseries. And in case you didn't catch that, we're talking about millennials, crushes, and adulthood today. And yes, this will be the last piece of this puzzle, as I have no idea how millennials will react to crushes in their golden years just yet. So let's get to the not so distant past for many of us and our present, because as much as we hate to admit it, millennials, we're in the bad place now. We're the grown-ups and it's horrible. So when this all started, we had to go back to the 80s and 90s to when we were kids. Little ones taking in whatever animated goodness was thrown our way, and for a majority of us, it was all about Disney movies. Really? The premier animation choice of a millennial's childhood. Now, if this next part sounds familiar, it's because I'm just reading the start of a piece I posted on Crushgasmpodcast.com about the delusional Disney to rom-com realization pipeline. See, millennials, we grew up with the most prestigious era of Disney. During the Renaissance, we got not only the cream of the crop when it came to soundtracks, but also a lot of lessons about love that may have made things a little foggy as we got older. Abandoning family for someone we just met, sympathizing with our captor, accepting a liar. On the flip side, the lessons were to fall for someone we knew nothing about, keep someone captive long enough that they'll love you, and lie until they love you. Those are just a few examples of where we, as millennials, started out in life when it came to examples of love in the media. From there, we got sucked into teen TV and movies, later taking in every Reese Witherspoon and Kate Hudson rom-com we could get our little hands on at Blockbuster. All of those made up romances seem like perfection, even when they weren't. But as millennials entered the real world, they quickly realized that one doesn't always land a job in publishing and meet their perfect match in the cutest of ways. We entered adulthood with this fantastical sense of reality. Life was just 1 second away from being a movie, and the main character energy of millennials, well, it's an 11 out of 10 because we're likely the most pop culture obsessed generation by far. Gen X might be a close second, but because they were able to afford homes and had less pressure overall to go off to college and make something of themselves, millennials had way more time to consume culture day pop. But let's talk about the married aspect. According to this HuffPost article from 2017, only 26% of millennials between the ages of 18 and 32 were married that year. 10% less than the generation before us at that age, 22% less than boomers, and we're not even going to mention the silent generation. Well, let's do it, because when they were 18 to 32, 65% of them were married. So we were given all the tools to love romance, to yearn for it, crave it, but alas, in 2017, the numbers were like Shakira's hips. We weren't living the happily ever afters we watched growing up, because along with being raised by TV and movies, we were also being told time and time again about the importance of an education. Gen Z might beat us one day, but for a minute, millennials were the most educated generation in history. But Fortune reported in 2022 that we're also the first generation to prove that higher education may not have been worth it. This never happens in the movies, right? Usually when you do what you're supposed to, life finds a way to deliver to you what you deserve, right? Not for millennials who opted for education instead of family exploration. While some did marry their high school sweethearts and started procreating sooner than later, a majority did not. Not to say they didn't date. A great deal of millennials would go on to date and party their way through college as hookup culture, friends with benefits, and all that jazz rose in normalcy. So by the end of those college age years, there were two groups of millennials, the haves and the have-nots. Those that had a traditional family life and those that did not. For those that traveled the family and marriage route, I can't speak too much for you. You entered a world that I knew was never going to be my reality, as having kids was not something I'd ever dreamed of. Plus, I did meet my guy later in life, and after his health issues, kids were not going to be in our life story. So I do want to talk more about the path that was lined with thirst traps, unsolicited dick pics, and a whole lot of swipe or no swiping. Yes, the intense and oftentimes frustrating world of online dating. Meeting people using some form of media is nothing new. Personal ads were once a thing, replaced around the 80s with those weird dating videos. If you've ever seen those, please check them out. People would record VHS tapes of themselves, and whoever watched could then contact them. I don't really know, wasn't alive then, but it did seem wild. After that, the internet helped to usher in a new form of socialization, chat rooms. Oh, chat rooms. They got plenty of people in trouble, millennials included, but we weren't so much dating then. We were just catfishing the hell out of random people. Well, not me. I didn't dial up till 2005 when I went off to college. Anyways, AOL opened the doors to dating sites, which with the introduction of social media led to the dating apps that we have today. Now, I got off those like 2.4 seconds after the swiping feature was introduced. I had met my guy right before that, but I have swiped for friends and I can tell it's really fun. I see the appeal and the quickness of it, but there's also a disconnect as well. Can you really know who you could possibly be a match with based solely off a quick line, a photo, and maybe a few details about likes and dislikes? Aziz Ansari, yes, the guy from Parks and Recreation, put out a book in which he and a team of researchers put together a look at modern romance. And in case you want to pick it up, that's the title, Modern Romance. A great read and a look into love in the digital age. Our grandparents used to marry whoever was in town, possibly even next door, because proximity ruled then. Today, we could potentially meet someone halfway around the world and form a connection via the internet. However, there is a drawback to this that Modern Romance points out. Aziz notes how he had the perfect woman in his head, and that's what he'd look for on these apps, but he would come up with nothing. Dates never went past the first. Apps allow you to look for a person to be with in the same way the IKEA app lends itself to look for furniture. Call me old-fashioned, but picking a partner should require a bit more than picking a couch. And this is coming from someone who met their husband on a dating site. I champion them, but at the same time, I think millennials have a really bad case of grass is always greener syndrome that makes it hard for them to find someone. And I'm not sure it's entirely because of the way apps swipe left or right work, but I bet it has something to do with it. Why try and see where things go with Brad just because you had a great time last night when you just matched with this other guy who apparently parties on a boat? In turn, this goes back to that Disney delusion, only it's more so dating delusion. People might not be giving relationships time to form. They're just going on a date, and while on the date, scrolling for their next, which is bad if said person is looking for love, but not so bad if they are in their hoe phase. The hoe phase. I recommend everyone have at least one of these in their lifetime. Whether it's at 22 or 62, get out there and be a hoe. Of course, be safe along the way. However, what a hoe phase does is allow yourself to explore not only yourself sexually, but also personally. The silent generation were okay shacking up with the person next door, or so they say, but who knows if your grandparents ever regretted having one on their body count list. Hey, we listen, we don't judge, and I'm here to say if you haven't yet, release the hoe safely and responsibly. Remember, millennials came up during a time that was both for and against sex. It was sold at every turn, from cartoons we watched, Jessica Rabbit, Princess Jasmine and Red, Nala and Simba fucking to Elton John, to the ads that sold us sex on top of soda, hamburgers, and even hair products. Them Herbal Essence commercials were insane. However, millennials also came up during this weird purity era where youth groups were swearing up and down, mostly to young girls, that having sex before marriage would not please their Lord and Savior. As we got older, more educated, a lot of us realized that we could fucking be okay. So again, hoe phase, I applaud you for doing it, no matter when it is. Just don't be in a relationship when you do it. Hoe phases should be for the single people. I don't want to get any broken hearts out of this. The delusion of Disney led millennials down a path of fantasy that only grew as we continued to take in romance from TV and movies, including rom-coms in the early 2000s that set our expectations high, only for dreams of romance to bottom out when we were out of college and in an overpopulated dating app scene. Some married early and avoided all of this, but a great deal of millennials, we swiped left, right, and while some found love, others realized their inner hoe and it felt rejuvenating after what felt like a lifetime of society saying to keep our legs closed. Pop culture dug into our collective psyche as kids, and as we got older, millennials did have to navigate new territories like never before them. I mean, Tinder, our grandparents could and would never. Well, that's it for Crushes That Raised Us. I hope you enjoyed this little mini-series and these micro episodes. I've linked those 2 articles mentioned before from Fortune and HuffPost, along with all of Crushgasm's other information. So until next time, as always, keep crushing it. Crushgasm is part of the I Did Not Make These Rankings podcast network, along with some other pretty cool shows, including An Evening at the Movies, Crime Rewind, Literature Reapers, Love is Black, Masturbators, Men Are the Prize, Season to Season, The Sip List, and Toontastic Journeys. You can go to idnmtrpodcastnetwork.blog to find not only Crushgasm, but all of the aforementioned really cool podcasts. Alrighty.